we'll find out what happens when a world-class singer who toured with legends decides to strip away every mask and tell the truth in her brand new memoir, which is called Naked Out Loud.
My father was American military. After World War II, he was stationed in Japan. My mother, who is full-blooded Japanese, she was a singer. And after the war, she was singing in these little jazz clubs around Tokyo. That's how they met, which is kind of a Hollywood story in itself.
Good evening, Machan, and welcome to Whereabouts Tales.
Thank you so much.
So today in the episode, we'll find out what happens when a world-class singer who toured with legends decides to strip away every mask and tell the truth in her brand new memoir, which is called Naked Out Loud. Maybe before we start, I'd like to say that all the links of your social media and also the link to the book are going to be in the show notes description. Before we dig in the book, I have to start a bit to understand where are you coming from and what's your upbringing story. So, in the preface, you wrote that what you felt was being in the middle of everything and nowhere at the same time, because you were somewhere in between the Eastern and Western influences and uncertain where you belong. Can you tell about a bit of a story about your family?
Yes. My father was American military. And after World War II, he was stationed in Japan, during the American occupancy. So, post-World War II, he was stationed on the Army base in Yokohama. And it just so happened that my mother, who is full-blooded Japanese, she was a singer. And after the war, she was singing in these little jazz clubs around Tokyo. She sang American jazz songs because she loved Hollywood, and she loved, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and, the music of the 40s. And so she sang in a lot of little jazz clubs with different bands. And she ended up singing in the officers club that was on the Army base in Yokohama that my father happened to be the manager of. So that's how they met, which is kind of a Hollywood story in itself.
Absolutely. And were you born there?
I was born in Yokohama. My mother also, it's another long story, but she was married before to a Japanese man. So I have an older sister who's my half-sister. She's 9 years older than I am. So, and anyway, my mother lost contact with him during the war. I'm not really sure about that story. But so anyway, I was born there, and around my age of 4.5, my father had now retired from active military duty, and he had trouble finding a job in Japan because he was a gringo, right?
Absolutely.
He was American, and it was difficult for him. So he was able to get a job in New York. He was originally from New Jersey. So they decided to take that job. So my family, my mother, my father, my older sister, and myself, we traveled on a military ship from Yokohama to San Francisco, and then traveled from San Francisco across the United States on a train to New Jersey. So that's how I ended up here.
That's a story for itself. Machan. So to be honest, traveling with the military ship from Japan to the West Coast, and then from the West Coast to the East Coast with the train, also a military train, or it was just a regular train?
No, just regular civilian train. But it's funny, and I say this in the book, to this day, I don't like ships. And I don't like being in the middle of the ocean, but I love trains.
But do you remember something from the trip, being 4.5?
I think I remember very, very vague little memories,
Mm-hmm.
I have very vague memories of Japan and, I definitely remember my grandmother and extended family. I have cousins that are still alive in Japan, but, I loved my grandmother and, you have to remember this at that age, I could only speak Japanese. It was all my first impressions of the world were there, and the food and the culture, everything that those were my first impressions of the world of life. So, it wasn't until many, many years later that I realized that it was a very traumatic experience leaving Japan and being transported to America to this completely foreign world.
But you moved. You said you came with the family, with the extended family. That means there was a lot of Japanese happening in the house at the beginning, from the language
Oh,
perspective.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, everything. Everything. Yeah. It's the only language I knew at that age.
Was it also the culture that was brought back from Japan to the US, like inside the house?
Some of it, yes, definitely some of it. But I think once we arrived in America, because my father didn't speak Japanese fluently, so and it was a very different time. There were still a lot of very discriminating feelings towards the Japanese after World War II. So my father wanted me and my older sister to assimilate and become American. So he told my mother to stop speaking to me in Japanese and tried to kind of get my mother and my older sister to really become American, you know.
And that was like just to get rid of the social pressure, right? Because there was nothing else except social pressure.
Yeah, and honestly, there even with that, there was still a lot of discriminating feelings that I experienced as a child. My mother also experienced, discriminating attitudes and um, feelings from American people at that time. And yeah, it was a very different time in American culture.
Absolutely. So, especially the let's say the politically correctness that we have today, and that intercultural respect that we have today was not there as a result of the war, as people were at the beginning to in doing so much intercultural exchanges, and I think there was a big difference in those times compared with today. Um,
Uh-huh.
but did this made you accept the American culture, or did made you push it away? The fact that you were forced to embrace it.
Well, you kind of have no choice.
Absolutely.
You know, when you find yourself in a whole new place with new people, and I because of my age, I started school from the beginning, in America. So I had to figure out how to assimilate, but this is part of my story is I really carried with me this sense of confusion and not feeling like I belonged anywhere. I
Mhm.
wasn't fully Japanese and I wasn't fully white American. So how I couldn't, figure out for a really long time where I belonged and how to navigate that feeling of feeling in between and feeling nowhere, you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
not really knowing how to identify. Yeah.
You mentioned school, Machan, and I do guess that you discover first the music in school, right?
I did. Yeah, but it was there because my mother was a singer, so,
Correct.
so we always had music in the house. She was always playing records, back in the day it was records, and she was always singing in the house, and my sister too loved to sing. So music was a part of my upbringing, but I think how I kind of discovered my own identity as a singer was in school and church. I went to Catholic school when I was little. So I was always in church and I sang in the choir. And as I developed and got older, I started singing for funerals and weddings and private parties. And, I started getting gigs. So that was, it was sort of the beginning of me discovering, oh, wait a minute, I could actually do this and I'm pretty good at it and people seem to like it and I can make money. So wow,
Oh
cha-ching.
wow! So it was never actually, let me call it like this, a plan from your side. It just happened because you discovered you'll enjoy it and they enjoy listen to you, and then it just happened.
It just evolved. It just
Oh, that's
evolved.
in. That's nice. That's nice.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
did music somehow give you a sense of home, Machan, because of the fact that you had the music always at home through your mother?
Absolutely. Yeah. Music was a place of comfort. It was a place of escape. It was a place of familiarity, and then eventually it gave me a sense of identity and power in a way, right? Because I started to have recognition from people, like, oh, you're a beautiful singer, blah blah blah, and it gave me a sense of identity and a belonging. And, therefore musicians became my community, as I developed. So I started hanging out with, well, it was a lot of boys, which was kind of fun too. Right? Because most musicians were boys. So I hung out with a lot of boys and that was fun. And as a teenager and, yeah, I was hanging with the cool people and, so music gave me a lot of richness in my life that I didn't feel I had at home.
If you need to point it like in an year area, when did that happen? Back, was it in the begin eight and mid of 80s, beginning of 90s?
No, so you have to remember I'm a war baby, right?
I
So,
know.
uh, so when I was a teenager in my high school years, sort of the end of grammar school and then in high school, I think our school systems are a little different,
They are different, but
but
I understand
yeah.
in the meanwhile the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was right around the age of 12, 12,
Oh.
13. That was right at the end of grammar school
Mhm.
and beginning of high school for me.
Mhm.
So that's when I started singing in bands and I was actually started out singing by myself, playing acoustic guitar and singing folk songs, and that's how it really started for me. I taught myself how to play guitar, and I was singing, Joni Mitchell songs and Joan Baez and early folk songs. Um, but then eventually I started singing in bands in high school. So, I was in my early teenage years
Mhm.
then. And this would have been, so the era would have been 70, 1970, 71, 72, 73. Yeah, I graduated high school I graduated in 3 years. Normally it's 4 years, but I wanted to get out and I wanted to get into the world. So I worked really hard
You are making
and I,
you are making the money already. Like, come on.
yeah, yeah. So I wanted to get out into the world. So I graduated in 1973 from high
That
school.
those are amazing time from the creativity point of view, and I think the music from back then, I still think it's amazing. I still think one of the best songs that ever made, what made there in the 70s, in the beginning of 80s, mid of 70s, beginning of 80s.
Yeah.
But how hard was, you mentioned singing in bands, Machan, how hard was it back then to, yeah, to get popular, to get famous with through music?
Well, it was such a different business. So when I came up, we had so many clubs around the New York City area. I grew up in New Jersey. like an hour and 15 minutes outside of New York City. And there were so many clubs to play and actually make money back in those days. And this is pre MTV, pre YouTube, pre the internet, pre cell phones,
for
pre
for
everything.
the kids watching this. So I have to make a small comment. No, there was no Spotify. No, there
No,
was no Apple Music. No, there was no CDs. No,
no.
there were the vinyls, and not even that popular yet. And I think there was I don't know the English word for those big wheels of tape. So before the
Oh,
cassette.
eight track tape.
Exactly. Those were the one. And when you were when you had the option to listen to live music, you were doing it because there was not happening. Was not happening that often. You could not get the music that you want as easy as you could today. So I'm sorry for jumping in, but I
No,
always
that's
I
great.
always feel the need to do this explanation because I think it's so funny when someone is watching and say you can listen to anything on Spotify. No, you can't. No.
No, it's true. It was a very different world. Yeah. And for from us, in America, it's a very different scene in Europe, but the drinking age, alcohol drinking age at that time was 18 years old. Now it's 21.
Really?
Now, yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
It's
that's
very different
interesting.
in Europe.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is interesting. But because of that, because of the era, the time, playing in clubs, it was so much fun because it was full of young people, college kids, because they could drink at 18, right? So it's so different in Europe, I know. But live music was the thing to do, to go hang out at clubs and bars and hear live music and connect with your friends. And it was such a scene, and it was packed all the time. And so for someone like me and my generation, it was the way we learned how to play and sing, because you had to play 4 sets a night, like 4 hours. So you would play a 45-minute set, and then you would take like a 15-minute, 20-minute break,
And then
and
again.
then yeah, and you do that all night long. I mean, that when you read the stories about the Beatles, right? This was in the 60s for
Yeah,
them,
a
you
bit
know.
more in front. Yeah.
Yeah, they were playing in Hamburg, and they would play like for 8 hours or something in those clubs, right? So, I mean, people don't understand that now, but that's how they got so good. That's how people developed their talents. And now, I see these young artists, up and coming artists, that they put, they do a YouTube video or they do a TikTok video, and all of a sudden they go viral, but they've never even stepped on a stage. And it's incredible. And
It's crazy to see them, Marcin. It's crazy to see them like they get concerts and they never had more than maybe a half of a song, and they are
yeah,
they are on the stage singing concerts, and they realize what are you doing there? I mean, why you do that? Just you cannot entertain for 45 minutes. You have nothing. Those are not your creations. That's so
yeah,
different.
yeah. Yeah, it's so different. And also because I teach at university now, I teach at NYU here in New York City, and I teach at a school called the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music. So it's all contemporary music. And I see so many young people that, they've grown up with recording software in their bedrooms since they're little kids. So they've been recording and making music, which is wonderful, but they don't know anything about live performance. Some of these kids that have absolutely no experience being in front of an audience. And also, I've seen over the last couple of generations of young singers that have made it very quickly in the business, like someone like Adele or Sam Smith or Megan Trainor. And there's a long list of these young singers that didn't have the experience touring, and then they got into trouble vocally. So Adele had, I think she had 2 or 3 surgeries, vocal surgeries over the years. And I know from her speaking publicly about it, and also my teacher in New York was one of the teachers that did her rehab from her first surgery.
Oh, okay.
And, so i- it's a very serious thing when you're not ready to go out on tour and do 4 or 5 shows a night, and you're touring and you're doing radio and television promo and talking all day long. And then, and you're young, so you're partying and smoking and drinking and carrying on. And all of a sudden you lose your voice and you don't know why.
Exactly.
You know? So there is something very important to be said for having experience before you go out on tour and before you actually become a so-called star,
I think one
you
of
know?
I love music. So you don't know this, but I love music. I love all kind of music. I listen to everything because I like to experience different kind of music, different kind of sounds. I have no I have, of course I have some small favorites, but I listen to all kind of music, and I love the stories of musicians. I didn't know about Adele. That she had surgery is really interesting. I think it's one of her. So Adele, I think it's one of the really good voices that we have, at least based on my opinion. Not professional. I'm sorry if I if I go out of the.
No,
Uh,
she has a wonderful sound, and I'm really, I've seen her a couple times live, and she's wonderful.
and but one
Yeah.
of the nice examples that we have in this world, like for example, for me at least, is Ed Sheeran. I still think that the story of Ed Sheeran showing himself singing publicly when he was 16, where he had zero experience and zero voice and zero nothing, and you just realize that you have to work so much and so hard to get to that level of professionalism, where he's holding a concert today alone with 26 guitars, and that's it. Like, it's only him, and he's doing this today here in the city, tomorrow in a different city. But
Yes,
it's a
amazing.
hard work. I'm
Yes,
absolutely convinced that it's a hard work.
it is. It takes a lot of devotion and dedication and practice, and it doesn't just happen overnight.
Exactly. I love the interview with him when he's saying, "You had talent." No, nope, I haven't. Nope. It was just work, hard work and practice.
Yeah, it's so true, and he's wonderful. Gosh, he's so talented.
Yeah,
Yeah, and obviously he's worked very, very hard to get where he is.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and Machan, how did you get from live singing in New York, which I think, of course, you get to be seen by important people because, let's be honest, it's the most amazing city in the world. But how did you get from there to singing with the actual stars of the industry?
Well, again, it didn't just happen overnight, right? I had a band in New Jersey in my teenage years, and it was such an eclectic group. We were called Grover, Margaret, and Zazu Zaz. And I know it's a funny name, but we did this really crazy mix of um, old swing jazz tunes and bebop vocal arrangements and our own original songs that were kind of more pop jazz fusion kind of sound, that was popular in the 70s. And we became very popular in our New York metropolitan area, and we ended up doing the Newport Jazz Festival, Spoleto Jazz Festival, a lot of big clubs in New York. We got rave reviews with shows that we did, and we were very, very close to getting a major record deal. And it was a funny time in the business because it was sort of coming out of um, the era with rock and pop, so you had the Beatles, you had the Rolling Stones, you had Joni Mitchell, you had all these artists from the 70s, 60s going into the 70s. But right at the end of the 70s, going into the 80s, it started to change. So it started going into disco being very popular. And then it sort of went into punk. So if you kind of recall some music, contemporary music history, there was a big shift that happened. So we were popular and trying to get a big record deal right at that period, like the end, like 77, 78, 79, maybe, right in that time period. So we never got a big record deal. So we had been together, and this story is in my book about this band and that period. But anyway, because, I felt like it was time to move on, because we had not gotten a record deal, I decided that I was going to leave the band. I left the band. And at 19 years old, I auditioned for a job that I didn't think I was going to get. And it was a very unusual singing job, but I got the job with the Glenn Miller Orchestra, which was a jazz big band. And so I was 19, 20 years old.
Wow.
And it was the first job that took me on the road and into the world. It was not ultimately the music that I wanted to do, but I saw it as a great experience and a great
Absolutely.
opportunity. So I was able to travel, to Japan and travel to Europe and all over the United States. And I did that for a year. So from that, that, took me into a moment of transition where I took some time off. I left that group and I ended up getting a job a production job, not a singing job, because I needed a gig. So a friend of mine who was working in production on the Jackson Victory Tour called me, and this was in New York. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Right now, nothing. I'm looking for a job." So he said, "Do you want to come work production for the Jackson Victory Tour?" So I said, "Yeah, sure." So I went, and I thought it was just going to be for a week. And I ended up clicking with the people in the production office, and they took me for 6 months on that tour, on the Jackson Victory Tour. And it was a trip. And from that experience, I met so many people in the business. And, this is where I tell my students and I just say to young people, just say yes. Just say yes to different opportunities that come your way. Even if it's not exactly what you want to be doing, you never know who you're going to meet. You just never know where that next opportunity is going to take you.
You never know what you're saying no to.
Exactly. So from the Jackson Victory Tour, I ended up, I kind of forget sometimes what the chronology of my of all these stories.
People will see it in the book.
Yeah, they'll see it in the book. But yeah, from doing the Jackson Victory Tour, it connected me with so many people that ended up connecting me to Pat Benatar and to Foreigner and to Pink Floyd and to everything else that I did in my career.
I just wanted to make a small remark. So before we move on, for everyone interested in the book, I will give away one of the books when we post the episode.
Wonderful.
I mean, just easy. I don't want to make it complicated. Whomever wants to read your amazing book, I would say just write a comment with "I want the book," and I would say first come, first serve.
Beautiful.
Before we make it complicated. This is a known, like an internal curiosity, since as I said, I'm a big fan of music. I know most of the names that you mentioned, but I want to ask you, Machan, what's the rapport between between panic and excitement when you get up on the stage with, I don't know, with Sting, with Pink Floyd? What's the balance there?
Wow, that's an interesting question, the way that you pose the question. Um, yeah, performance anxiety is a real thing, and it's something I talk about with my students, because it's a natural kind of response in the body, right? Performance anxiety, or that feeling of fight or flight,
Mm-hmm.
which is just a natural response of fear, as a human being. Um, but obviously, I'm not being chased. We're not being chased by tigers when we step on stage. But it's the same feeling. It's the same exact feeling. So I think for me, just learning about the physiological understanding of what the fight or flight syndrome or response is, and knowing that it's a very natural feeling. I think over the years, uh, I learned how to talk to myself, and process that feeling of adrenaline and nervousness, and learned how to channel it into giving me energy to do my job. And I think that's pretty much what most performers learn how to do, is realize that it's just natural to feel that shakiness and that nervousness. But it can also be fuel to energize your performance.
Nicely
Yeah.
put. I haven't thought about this, like to use it as a fuel, but I think to acknowledge the fact that it's there and it's a natural reaction, I think that's helping a lot to realize that yes, there are no tigers following me.
No,
Or
there's no tiger. And it doesn't, and also I say to my students, because I've learned, over so many years of doing this, that a lot of times there will be voices that come up like, oh, I'm not good enough, or oh, I'm terrible, or I look terrible. Whatever the voices are that come up in your mind, it's not true.
that's
It's
only
not,
the
none of it is true.
that's only the imposter syndrome that we all somehow faced. It's all only our brain trying to convince us that something must be fishy because you should not be here.
Exactly. Exactly. It is. And I've struggled with imposter syndrome, all my life. And I think a lot of people do. I don't think it's so uncommon.
I think it's most of the people that have success. Um,
Yeah.
Machan, was it different to sing on with your own band, or and to sing with a really famous singer, or was for you was the same?
um no, it's definitely different when you're center stage, right? When
Ah,
when
okay,
when you're the focus, when you're the main focus. Singing with Pink Floyd or Sting or someone like that, you're still a focus, but you're not the star.
correct.
So, did you ever see the movie 20 Feet from Stardom?
No,
Oh, you should check it out. It's a really well
I
done
will.
documentary. But it was all about background singers.
Ah, okay.
Um, 20 feet from stardom. So we're always, 20
Yeah, yeah.
feet behind
I
the
understood. I understand the
star.
logic. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. But it's so true that you're in the shadows, but it's also an important role.
it's a
Like
crazy
any,
important. It's crazy for anyone
yeah,
that understands music. It's crazy important because you cannot hold. I don't know if you, no, I most probably don't, but Justin Timberlake had recently a tour in Europe, and he's generally based on what I've seen live, he's a good singer, but
oh, he's
apparently
great.
he had some vocal issues. And the last two concerts, one in Vienna and the second one was in Cluj, or in my home city in Romania.
Oh,
Apparently, was mostly the backing vocals that hold the concert because he couldn't
oh.
And then you realize
Oh
how
no.
important is it to have. So he was there on the stage, and everyone said, yeah, he was not in the mood to sing or something, but apparently he was actually having issues with his voice.
Oh.
He has a
Oh, that's
disease.
too bad.
Exactly.
That's too bad. And at that level, it's so difficult to cancel shows
Yes, for sure.
because you're talking about millions of dollars at stake. So that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that for him. But he is, I think, an amazing singer.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and I've seen him in a lot of live singing, and he's doing a really nice show with his backing vocals, because that's what I remember about him. He's doing a really, like, they are always there. I don't have the reason why I remember, because I never had the feeling they were 20 feet beside the start. They were always there in between on the stage, singing with him, playing and so on. So
Right.
it was a nice game. Machan, you reach what other people would call success, and uh, I would say on a level that a lot of people would like to have. One of the things that you mentioned as well in the book, you said that the people often hide behind status and reputation to protect their inner world. You mentioned American culture and Japanese culture. I can tell you in German culture, in Romanian culture, I think it's everywhere in all the cultures that I know. It's happening the same.
Hmm.
Um, but you had the success, and I want to ask you: did the professional success help you feel secure, or it somehow intensify the internal struggle?
It's interesting you chose the word intensify because um I definitely, and this is, the main, for me, this is really the important part of my story in the book is while I was having this wonderful life with my career, I really, really struggled personally, um, dealing with my childhood traumas and my insecurities and imposter syndrome and, um, n- you know, the discomfort that I was feeling personally in the midst of this seemingly glamorous life. And it in a way it did intensify my feelings of not belonging, feeling like I didn't belong there. Um, because it was such a dichotomy that I was experiencing. Um, it's interesting, but at this point in my life, now that I've written this book, and I've also had a lot of years of working on myself and therapy and um, retrospection. Um, I I can see how those moments in time. So, because Pink Floyd was 1987, 88. Sting was the last big tour that I did, which was 1999, 2000. And those periods back in the day in the 80s, when I was young, it was, rock and roll, a lot of alcohol and drugs and partying and craziness. And, it was part of the scene and it was a way, uh, it was just the way it was. But what now in looking back, I know that I was sort of numbing my discomfort and numbing
Mhm.
my pain with drugs and alcohol back then and partying. And a lot of people did, it was just sort of what was going on. Um, and it wasn't until I was really into getting into my 40s that I had to really be honest with myself and deal with my my past and deal with those feelings of insecurity and discomfort and try to heal those parts of myself. And that's part of my journey. in that book.
Was the book part of the healing?
Absolutely.
So that was
But
the.
I never intended it to be, though. It's funny, a number of years ago, I had friends, said to me, "Oh, you should write a book. It's so interesting, your story, and blah, blah, blah." And I thought, who cares? I mean, who's going to read it? Who cares? And, I really didn't think that I was going to be writing a book. But I started journaling and I just started writing stories down and then all of a sudden, like, almost 3 years later, I realized, oh my God, I have material enough for a book. So, uh, so then all of a sudden, I was pursuing this idea of doing a book. But what's interesting is the process of writing all these stories down really did become very cathartic and very healing. And so now I feel like now that the book is out in the world, I feel like it's another part of that process. And it's been a wonderful sense of just like letting it go.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So the book really helped you to change your relationship with yourself. Let's put it like this.
absolutely.
This
And I
so
never imagined it. It just evolved.
how is the writing, so the creative process for someone who used to write songs, switching from songwriting to book writing, is somehow the same structure in the creative process?
Yeah, you're very astute. You're very, very astute.
Oh, thank
It
you.
is, you are, Paul. You get it. You get it. So it is a similar process. Practicing music or songwriting, it's a very insular, thing. It's I'm used to spending time alone. And I think most musicians are, if you're going to practice, piano or whatever, you do it alone. You don't do it
Absolutely.
with other people.
Absolutely.
So, so when I started writing, I found this wonderful, peaceful place for myself. And I would, come into my office and, sit down with my computer and I would just start typing away and just let the stream of consciousness stories come out. And then all of a sudden, 4 hours, went by.
Wow.
And I would just go into this, the zone, as some people call it, the
Hmm.
zone, into this wonderful, you know, vortex of creativity. And I loved it. I love the process of writing. So yeah, and it's the same thing with songwriting. Like when I work on songs, I, just go into this quiet place in myself and, you know, it's fun.
How do you know when a song or a book in this case is finished?
You don't? You don't know? Like, I want to write the whole thing all over again.
But that's only the perfectionist in you.
Totally, totally. But yeah, it's hard to know. It's really hard to know. Like even with songwriting, you want to keep going back and oh, I want to change that and I have songs, now that are in the world that I've recorded and put out that I listen to them now and I'm like, "Oh, that should have been another word." or that I could, that should have been another chord change, or you're never done. I don't think you're ever done. You have to find a moment where you're comfortable enough with it to let it
You
go.
just give it to someone and say, I think you should take it now, because if you leave it for 2 weeks, I will write it again.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. It's like you have to stop yourself at a certain point and let it go. Otherwise, you're just constantly going over it and killing it. So, yeah. And I think a lot of creative people feel that way.
um, It's somehow so you mentioned already that you are a teacher, so you are teaching music in New York University, Clive Davis, if I have it correctly in my
Yes,
notes.
yes.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Did somehow teaching change your understanding of creativity?
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. No one's ever asked me that particular question. Um,
The reason why I'm asking you is because you always have a finish in teaching. Like you have to have a finish because the hour is finished, the semester is finished, the year is finished, and you always switch and you start over. And I always thought that somehow is influencing your creativity and to understand that there is an end. That's why I also asked the question with the book and the song before.
well, I think what's really been amazing about becoming a teacher, which I also never planned on. It just it came out of necessity, and then all of a sudden it became a passion and a vocation. Um, but I think what teaching has taught me is the the specialness and the beauty of each individual student, and discovering um, the unique way that someone, whether it's their voice, the way someone's voice is, and the things they need to work on, or the creativity that comes out of someone's songwriting and their perspective that comes out of their point of view and writing music. Um, so it's taught me to be a lot more open to each individual's voice, and I mean creatively and physically. And it's also taught me a lot more patience
What
because
can you imagine?
yeah, because I work with 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds. So when they're freshmen coming in, that's 1 foot out of high school. So they're very young, even though they don't think of themselves as young. But 18 is still young, right? And to watch them come in as freshmen and watch how they evolve and they grow over the period of 4 years in the college program, it's just wonderful to see how they blossom, see how they grow, and change and mature and get better at their skills. And it's been wonderful to see, these students develop and then go off, and then they fly off into the world, into their own careers and their lives. But yeah, it's teaching has really taught me greater patience and greater respect for other people's process.
Understanding the fact that people are learning different, they are building stuff different. I think that's an important learning. Machan, you mentioned before the lack of life experience for the new students. Um, do you have the feeling that they are there to search this rapid ramp up into a viral video on TikTok or YouTube, and they get the career fast wrapped up? Or do you have the feeling they still have the patience to do the things as they were meant to be done?
That's a good question. I see a lot of students, and it's only because they've grown up this way of only knowing the internet and only knowing YouTube and social media, Instagram, Facebook, all of that stuff. That's all they know. So, yes, of course, that's how they're thinking. They're thinking about getting a million views on their video on YouTube or whatever, and or a million listens on Spotify. I mean, that's what they know. So I can't, you can't fault them for that. But I think what happens is they realize, because unfortunately, you can't make a living off of Spotify.
The best example, I don't know if you know the video of Snoop Dogg being asked, discussing about his Spotify winnings. I don't know. Do you know this video? And he said,
I think I've seen it.
he
I think
said,
I've seen
I
it.
had 4 billion streams and I got $45,000. So that's all. I mean, there is nothing else to be told.
And that's 4 billion
4
streams,
billion
right?
streams, exactly.
Like, wow, and it's really, it's a shame what's happened to the business, because the business model has failed the artist. And it's so, I don't know if it's going to change. I don't know how or if it's possible. Um, but the reality is, if you're a young up and coming artist, from my point of view, if you can perform, if you can really sing and you can really play your instrument and you can get out there in front of a live audience, you have a chance of making a living as a musician, as a singer.
In the last, I think, 3 years, I discovered country. I had a business trip in the US that lasted for about 3 weeks. I told the story several times, but I was in North Carolina. So you cannot run away from country. Like if you start the radio, I always love to
Right.
listen to radio everywhere I go because that gives you a bit of the local feeling.
Right.
And I was listening to country, and of course I went down the rabbit hole like you always do, like. And I discovered Luke Combs and Morgan. I don't remember all the names, but I was to in the Europe concert last year in Europe of Jelly Roll and Post Malone, who started
Oh,
singing.
he's great.
Uh,
He's great, Jelly Roll.
Absolutely, the show that he hold on in Milano. I was in Italy in a show. It was amazing. I love him singing. I love his life story as well, and I think I still remember that piece where he said there is something special about a 39-year-old being the best debut. What's the word? Debut album. Debut album of the year. And I want to say exactly what you said. So I realized more in that country world, like there are a lot of people that I've never heard about before, and they are always singing live concerts. I always watch their YouTube channels. They are in this city, in that city, in the other city, in the other club, always singing somewhere live concerts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is how the music is evolving, right? Not through streams, not through YouTube plays, not through anything else.
Absolutely. That's the only way. It's I think it's a struggle for young artists right now. It just, even in New York City, when I was, like I said, when I was growing up, the drinking age was 18. It was full of young people. There were so many clubs. Now there's very few clubs for young, amateur bands and artists to play, and they don't get paid. They're not making money because the clubs don't pay unless you sell the tickets and you bring the people in. Maybe you can make a few dollars, but back in the day when I came up, we always had a guarantee of a fee, and then we made a percentage of the bar, and they used to charge, $5 or whatever at the door. So the band would get that money too. And we actually could make a living, playing clubs. That's how it was when I was a teenager. So that world is gone now, unfortunately. So I really feel a lot of compassion for young artists, and how difficult it is to make a career and make a living.
I think it's sad that the artists pay the availability price. Like we have everything available on our fingertips. So if I wake up in the night at 2 and I want to listen to Boney M, I can listen to Boney M and just play it. And because I don't have to search for the CD or the cassette where they was played, I still have there. It's not visible on the camera, but I still have my cassette collection.
Yeah.
I just keep it as a memory because I think it's I have an 8-year-old son, and every once in a
Oh,
while I take the tapes out and play them. I just have fun for him, trying to
it's
understand
so.
what's happening there.
What is that, Daddy?
Yeah,
What is that?
what is that?
It's an antique.
Yeah. But I think it's sad
Uh,
that the artists pay the price of availability. Like they want to be there, they want it to be available for the public, and now this happened where you realize, I don't know if it's that cool for the artists. It's cool that we have the music. It's cool that they can. It's easier to get popular. They don't necessarily need a contract. They don't need a record deal. I think the houses, the producing houses, lost a bit of their crazy power that they had,
yeah.
because that was also not healthy, because you
Mm-hmm.
had one guy deciding on the career of, I don't know, thousands of people per month, and that's also
Mm-hmm.
not healthy. But also this situation that we have today is not not healthy.
No,
I'm
no.
sorry, Machan, for going on the music rabbit hole, but I'm a huge music fan, and whenever I get
Yeah,
to
it's wonderful. It's
whenever
great. I love it.
I,
It's all good. It's all good.
um
Yeah.
um what do you think the reader should take from your story, Machan?
Mm. Well, I think the important part of my story really is about um, trying to destigmatize um, when you have an emotional, spiritual life problem, that there is no shame in talking about it. There's no shame in getting help if you need help. Um,
Independent if you're a
that
man or a woman. I'm sorry for interrupting.
exactly, no matter, we're all human beings, and we all have our ups and downs in life, even if it looks like someone's life is really successful and rich and sparkly and all of that stuff, we're still human beings underneath, and we all experience trauma on different levels, perhaps. Everybody's story is a little different, but no one escapes having difficulties. And I think the important thing, and the reason why I'm sharing my story, my personal story, is I want people to feel like there is no shame in speaking the truth about who you are.
That was really nice. That's really nice. Thank you for those words. Really important. I think we are living in a world that is judging quite fast when people are open about their feelings, and it can only be black and white. We are not allowed to be gray. We are only allowed to be black and white, and
Mm-hmm.
that's quite painful.
Yes,
Machan,
yes.
it was such a beautiful conversation for me. Such a pleasure to spend the time with you. Before we wrap it up, I still have a list of some rapid fire questions that I always like to tailor based on the guest.
Uh-oh.
Not though,
Okay.
not that bad, not half so bad. So, and I have only one question that I usually finish my episodes with after the rapid fire session.
Okay.
Favorite? I know they are extremely cliches, but I need to ask them because I need to.
Okay.
favorite
Fire away.
favorite artist of all time?
Oh my God.
I told you.
That's a
I
hard
told you.
question. Oh my God, it's so hard. I don't know. So I love so much music and I love so many artists. It's
I'm there.
really,
I'm
really.
there.
Oh, do you have an answer for that question?
No. Nope.
So why are you asking me?
Because I could tell. I don't know. Ask me on genre. Ask me on ages. And ask me on
Yeah.
times. I still think that one of the greatest voice that we ever had was Freddie Mercury. I still think that.
Oh, yes. Okay, voice, yes. Voice, he's
Voice,
one
yes.
of the best. But I have to say I'm a huge Radiohead fan. And I
Oh,
love Tom York, and I love Radiohead. I love the Smile Band, the other project he's been doing, and
okay.
so
One of the
that's
cool bands. Yeah.
yeah, that's my answer.
Perfect. You see, we got it.
Oh,
one album everyone should hear.
one album everyone should hear.
Like album, the old end to end. Start, side A, side B.
Obviously, I have to say Dark Side of the Moon. Obviously.
I don't know why it was clear for me, but okay.
Oh.
Favorite book besides your own?
Oh my. Well, I'm just started reading, and this is probably completely off track, but I just started reading the autobiography of Margaret Atwood, who is a writer and author. She wrote The Handmaid's Tale, which became a big show. Yeah,
I'm the only
she's
one
brilliant.
not able to watch that. I was talking to my wife just the other day, and I said I'm not able to watch. I'm getting so angry every time I try to watch the show.
I know, but it's so good.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But it's very intense, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
A place that shaped your soul, Machan.
A place, like an actual place, like a geographical place? Oh my goodness. Well, I think that going back to my roots and going back to my childhood, going back to Japan, even though I'm very American and Americanized because I grew up mostly in America, but I would say that a big part of my soul is still in Japan.
I was fishing for that answer.
You got it. You're very good. Okay. You're reeling them in.
A lesson. What's a lesson that music taught you about life?
Oh, to keep your heart open. To keep your heart and your mind open, because that is the door to creativity. That's, keeping your heart open is the door to healing, to happiness, to love, to all good things in life.
And the last one of the rapid fire. If you could sing one last song, what would it be?
One last song. Oh my God. These are hard questions.
They're not. They are called rapid fire because if you have time to think about it, you'll, I don't know, come with something philosophical in.
You know what just came to mind, and it's so funny. I don't know why this popped into my head, but there's a song. I think it's from The Sound of Music. Yeah, it's from The Sound of Music. Climb Every Mountain. Do you know this song?
You know the funniest story? I live in Germany since 11 years, and I was talking left and right about The Sound of Music, and I realized nobody knows the movie in here. And you know why? Exactly.
No.
And you know why? Because it's it's from the Second World War, and it's with the von Trapp family. Exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody knows the movie here. Just a fun fact. Nobody. And then I did my research, and there was all I think there was for 1 month in one cinema in the whole country. Nothing else.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow, but I kind of understand it in a certain way too. But the music is so beautiful.
I think it popped into my head because a few years ago, what's the name of the singer, of the small girl that sang a song based on the soundtrack of The Sound of Music?
Wait, are you thinking of Julie Andrews?
No.
Oh no, the little girl.
The little girl, which is now singing Ariana Grande.
Oh, okay.
I think she had a song which was called 7 Seconds or 7 Minutes, and it was based on the on the beginning of The Sound of Music, so of that famous start. And
Oh, okay.
it got popular here, and nobody was talking about the fact. So like they sampled it. Like, no, they haven't. It's a new song. No, they sampled it. Like that's the sample that I know from The Sound of Music.
Oh, wow. I didn't put that together. Wow.
Me neither.
How
But
about that?
absolutely. My son, I was telling you, my son is 8 years, and he discovered supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
It's
So
great. Isn't it great?
2 weeks, since 2 weeks, Machan. I hear nothing else since 2 weeks.
I love it. I love it. It's fun. It's a fun song to sing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even though the sounds of it is something pure atrocious. I know the lyrics now better than I ever did. Last question.
Great.
Last question, Machan. Is home a feeling or a place?
It's a feeling. For me, it's a feeling.
Thank you so
It's
much.
within yourself. Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure. And
Same here. A lot of fun. It was fun.
A lot of fun
Fun
for me
call.
as well.
Yeah.
And if whenever is a second book coming out, please let me know. I want to talk about
Okay.
it again, and I want to read it like this one.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. I wish
All
you all the
right.
best, and hope we talk
Thank
soon
you.
again. Bye-bye.
Yes. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.